Hello and good evening, everybody. So, in this talk, which may be around 1 hour, I'm trying to speak about the new theatre happening in Kerala, in Malayalam stage. As I said, the term denotes to not with the contemporaneous or the period in which it is done or anything like that, and we could very well see that many of the productions which are doing right now in this day is not very new. It has been from the old mill of doing things maybe 50 years before, and it doesn't also mean that something that has been done say 50 or 60 or 70 years old is very old. It still remains very contemporary and very new. So the term denotes not the time period, but the approach of theatre, the form of telling it, the content of saying it, and the relationship with the context and the period and how it is moving ahead. So that I am to make it very clear. And I am trying to speak about the performance oriented theatre more than the text or the subject that it is dealing with in this talk. Of course, what's happening in Kerala theatre is having parallels with other parts of the country, India. As everywhere else, the Kerala theatre, the performance tradition of the new theatre or the theatre as an individual art form started by the colonial influence by translating plays from the West, including Shakespeare, and the translations from classical plays, Shakuntalam, and it's also said that certain work like Kyriakos Chavara, Kyriakos Elias, in trying to do plays in the Christian churches or the where these Christian stories are being told way back in 1850s, etc., and it further means it became a movement with the Sangeet Natak tradition of touring theatre, where they put up melodramas, stories from the history, stories from the epics, with a lot of music, color and spectacles, visuals, high melodrama, great dialogues, which attracted the masses who went there, took tickets and saw the productions. And there is the next stream of the social plays, so-called social plays, influenced again from the West, which dealt with subjects and topics which is highly important to the social reality of the society, like say how you treat women, what is the need of giving education to women, and what is those beliefs and false attitudes like dowry, the exploitation of the peasant by the landlords, feudals, and how does equality, social equality mean? It should be addressed. So such socially burning issues are being addressed in plays. It has been written and performed as part of the social movement, as part of the renaissance that's happening, and the renovation of the society to happen, and also a part of the struggle for Indian independence to fight against colonialism. So this happens in the 30s to 50s. I could say that there's a strong stream of the socially committed plays from V.T. Bhattadripad to K.T. Muhammad. I makes it like from V.T. to K.T. Those plays which has been written and performed very widely, seen by the audience, the people, and who are affected and influenced. And it's many times people say that that one play which made a very drastic influence in the social attitude and the political atmosphere of the country, means the state, is Ningal Enne Communist Aki, You Made Me a Communist, written by Topil Phasi, just in the early 50s, and performed very widely all over Kerala. It's still being run, which paved an atmosphere for communism, and that was one of the reasons which resulted in the success or the winning of the Communist Party in the first ever elections in 1950 1967 and to make a communist leader as an elected chief minister, elected government. And it followed by that mainstream theater of social messages, the touring companies, all those things are there, but they do not belong to the new theater. Of course, theater itself was new from the early 90s to 60s, but it fall into that established kind of proscenium theater, which is everywhere, maybe in the world, which is having a direct influence by the colonial form of theater as we are seeing it. So the theatre of Kerala, the Malayalam theatre also went through all these phases. And when did this new thing, or the new theatre started happening, new theatre as such started happening? It started, I could say, a little later in compared to the Maharashtra or Bengal or some other parts of North India. We started it in the early 70s or the very late 60s. It all started happening that some people felt that theatre is a different language. It's a different form. It's not just the paraphrasing of the written text, the drama. It doesn't mean that certain actors who mark the lines written by the playwright, put the costumes and come on the stage and speak loudly, if possible, through their voice or through the mic system, which advances their voice and dialogues to the audience so that they can retell the playwright's writing in a human form. And people said that no, and this is not exactly theatre. Theatre has a different language. It's not repeating the lines written by the playwright. It has to create another translation or transcription of the text using the language of the theatre. So this term Ranga Bhasha is separate from the Likhita Bhasha, the written text. So the performance text is different from the written text. So this concept started in the late 60s. More exactly, I could say that it started in 1967, if I want to give an year, because it is in that year the movement, and a movement known as Nataka Kalari, the theatre workshop, started. And the first ever Nataka Kalari, the first ever theatre workshop happened in 1967 in Shastangota, near in the southern state of Kerala, near Kollam. And late Professor G. Sankara Pillai, a veteran playwright, a theatre messiah, I will say, who lived his life propagating theatre, the new theatre. He was a playwright also, but he was a great teacher. He was the brain behind, and of course he was having an accompaniment of many people like M. V. Devan, M. Govindan, Dr. Nataka Panikkar, C.N. Sreekantan Nair, M. Thomas Matthew, a lot of them. So they started this theatre workshop, which looked into the theoretical possibilities of emerging a theatre language, creating a unique language, and what is the grammar or the craft of theatre. And for the first time it argued that theatre needs some sort of training. Of course, NSD started, National School of Drama started in Delhi much before. We know it started in 1958, followed by 1962, which when Al-Kasi was in charge, and there are graduates, somebody from Kerala also went there and came back, etc. So this new wind of theatre education, this new sphere of theatre education is happening around, but it came to Kerala also in these theatre workshops. So it was a two-edged thing. One is the theoretical, aesthetical approach specifically needed to define theatre. The second one was the practical training that is to be given for the actor and the technicians, including the director. So these two become a kind of systematic approach. It asks for a systematic approach in doing theatre, and it is there the modernism or the modernism in theatre started. Of course, modernism started in Kerala painting, Kerala literature, poetry much before. It happened a little late in the sphere of drama and theatre. Of course, we have new models of writing influenced in the expressionistic methods, influenced by Ibsen, Brecht, even absurd plays. All these things are coming in slowly, but to do theatre, this new concept, new approach started in the workshop in 1967, which was repeated in 1968 in another village known as Kavalam in the middle central part of Kerala, and then it happened in the northern Malabar area, and there's a lot of workshops in different parts of the state, and this man and his group G. Sankara Pillai traveled to these places and they started teaching theatre, and which culminated in 1977 in the formation of the School of Drama under the University of Calicut at Trissur, which became an important institution in molding the fate of or the form of Indian means Kerala theatre. So this movement had a lot of things to open up, a lot of windows to what is happening outside the state, throughout India, what's happening outside in the West, mostly in the West. We didn't go to the East or Japan or other things for some time. Later that also started coming in. So this exposure to the theatre that's happening outside, and critically started questioning the aesthetical approaches of theatre and the possibilities of formulating a language, and the introduction of the craft and the technology like using light, set, costume, music, etc. That also started in these workshops, and of course it propagated much more. It is expanded in the curriculum of the School of Drama, and naturally it created students who are equipped to do modern theatre to graduate from the school. So it's not just the school, when this graduates of the school, it's not, it didn't end there, because there was a lot of productions happening there in this new genre of theatre, and lot of totally different approaches by different directors, not just from all over India, the masters. I could remember the productions done by Benzi Kaul, K.G. Krishnamurthy, etc. in those years itself. But there were directors coming from Europe, from Finland, from Switzerland, from other parts of the world, coming as guest directors, working here with the students and doing wonderful productions, which were eye-openers for not just for the students, but for many of us who traveled to school to see the productions and to have an interaction with the students. And there were extension workshops organized in the schools. So the School of Drama taught not just the students, it taught the whole state about the possibilities of theatre. And as G. Sankara Pillai is also one of my mentors, already repeatedly said that we or I show you the open different windows for you. So these are the things happening outside. These are the possibilities. These are the approaches. You have to see it, understand it, and then you have to negotiate yourself and decide what you want and create your own methodology, your own aesthetics, your own approach, and your own form of theatre that depicts what you want to say. That's one movement of Nataka Kalari and the School of Drama which influenced. And at the same time, another major incident happened in Kerala is a national theatre festival organized by the Kerala Sangeet Natak Academy. It happened in 1977 at Ernakulam, Cochin, the central part of Kerala. And for the first time, very important productions came down from different parts of India and they performed there, which was very new and refreshing. In 97, I remember that I can tell you the name of the plays that has been performed. One was Charandas Chor by Habib Tanvir. Then there was Khasiram Gotwal, written by Vijay Tendulkar and directed by Jabbar Patel, that milestone production. And Ramanujam brought in the Tamil play Purancheri from Tamil. And there is the Malayalam play Avanavan Kadamba, directed by G. Aravindan, the filmmaker, written by Kavalam Narayana Panikkar. I will come back to Avanavan Kadamba because it's one of the very, very important happenings, events that happened in the Malayalam theatre. And then there was Jasma Avadan from Gujarat, directed by Shanda Gandhi. There was Hayavadana of Girish Karnad, directed by B.V. Karanth. See these production, and there was another production of Malayalam production of Crime in Crime in 1128, written by C.J. Thomas, another important Malayalam playwright, and directed by P.K. Venugopan Nair. That's a product of the theatre workshop, the Nataka Kalari. This play is a product of the Nataka Kalari. So these productions, when it came together, it has different approaches, a new language of narrating the story. And it has a new usage of the actor. It's a new kind of usage of the space. It has the newness in using the music, lighting, costumes, etc., which is totally refreshing for the theatre lovers and theatre workers of the state. And these plays was watched very keenly, and that these plays influenced a lot in the theatre people of Kerala to look into creating a new system. These were acting as different models or springboards to have new possibilities. And this was a major event. And much later, more national theatre festivals happened. There was more interaction between the theatre, the national theatre, means the theatre happening in India, and with the theatre people of Kerala, and which again in 2008 we started ITFoK, International Theatre Festival of Kerala, which brought in productions from other parts of the world. It's in 2008 it started. It's another period aesthetically, it's another period technologically, it's another period politically, and it gave some other thoughts, some other possibilities, another version of doing theatre. It's mostly the period where the post-dramatic theatre and the post-modern theatre, not just modern theatre, post-modern theatre or post-postmodern theatre started to function, and these interactions is again influencing and in the work and the style and the productions of these things. And as I said, Kerala is a very politically active state. We have a lot of political discussions and debates happening in the country, and that gets reflected in poetry, that gets reflected in painting. It also got reflected in the theatre also. So we have a very strong background or history of political theatre, which may be starting in 1937 or 38, when K. Damodaran wrote the first political play of the language, Pattabaki, the lease balance, the balance of the lease, Pattabaki. That's it. The first political play, a very unique text. Again, it's a new thing. That play also didn't narrate it has a strong story side inside, but it is not that kind of a melodramatic run-of-the-mill productions. It is having an episodic structure of 14 different scenes with many sub-stories and subplots which may not be that much relevant for the main storyline, but it is relevant to the context, it is relevant to the content, it is relevant to the political discourse that is happening. So these plots and the subplots, together with the story of a brother and sister, a brother who is becoming a thief to address poverty, and a sister who is taking up the role of a prostitute to face poverty, than yielding to the feudal landlords. So there's a very revolutionary text in the 1937. When I read it right now, I feel that it's having a closeness with the text of Bertolt Brecht in many ways. It's different, but it's having that episodical structure, plots and subplots, very loose storyline, less melodrama. It's more realistic. So even in 1937 itself, this newness in writing has started, but the performance of this play at that period didn't have this newness. It was done in a very proscenium kind of established colonial model of theatre. But later, maybe I myself was tried to redo this text in a newer form, where it's partly done as an immersive play, which has direct addresses with the audience. The dialogues were more between the audience and the actor, not between the characters, and a continuous narrative, and which has an audio or music that makes you remember about the history than the connecting with the storyline or the emotional content of the storyline, etc. So such productions were happening much later. So this political theatre was part of it, and in 70s, as you know, anywhere in India was a very, very important period. It has a lot of political activities, disillusionment, hope and distress, the emergency, the freedom of speech, and the radical political movements getting a hold in the minds of people, extreme leftism like CPI-ML and this movement. So all these things happened, and the youngsters were debating about the political content of this. Naturally, we have a theatre counterpart, which we can call the ITFoK theatre, which is a revolutionary theatre that started in the late in the 1970s. There's many groups who performed plays like Spartacus, Padayani, Amma means the mother, based on the Maxim Gorky text, and Nadakavedi is a very important play in that category. Nadakavedi, that was performed in late 70s. It has been performed by a group of people, artists, who have some connections with the CPI-ML group. It's a cultural wing of the people's movement, and it has been enacted by theatre people and the tribes of Wayanad district. It used open spaces. It broke away the proscenium language. It happened in a more intimate space between the actor and the audience, and it used the tribal rituals as the form and also as part of the content. How to eradicate the false evils that has been falling on the system. It's Gaddika. And this play in the later 70s, 77, 78, 79, it is banned by the state government also, then government also, but they had performances. They just came, assembled together and did the performance and escaped. And this is something similar that happened earlier to the play You Made Me a Communist, which was also banned at certain parts of the country, means the state, not everywhere in the state. So they just come, did the play and disappeared. So it's a political activity also. So theatre became a political activity, and the form of theatre becomes ITFoK, and the mode of theatre, that's very important in this Nadakavedi. It's not just the content. It's not just the content and the political ideology. It started to speak out. That revolt is there on the form of the theatre also, the mode of theatre also. So it is re-investigating the practice of theatre. It is re-investigating the aesthetics of theatre and the methodology of theatre. And it started using rituals and traditional performance forms as part of the theatre. So that's one production, and there are similar productions that happened done by many theatre people, which is having another stream of theatre that's happening around. And I would like to add up here the street productions, the street plays. And in 1980s, the street plays started very common. And the Kerala Shastra Sahitya Parishad, KSSP, they have a cultural tour all over Kerala every year, and they have small performances of 15 minutes, 20 minutes, which spread the message of radical thought, scientific thought in people on different subjects. They used theatre, music, formations, compositions, skits, which I could say that's a continuation of the IPTA movement of the 30s, but a little more renewed. And this also attracted a lot of people. People went to see these productions and they saw these productions. It was very informal, very direct, but aesthetically good also. It was fun, it was content, it was direct communication, it was new, and it happened on roadsides or small places, which again broke the grammar of theatre. It's an extension of the IPTA movement, maybe. So that also is part of the political theatre movement. But sadly, I have to say that after say 10-15 years, that form was become a static form, which didn't renew itself. It's repeated again and again and become a cliche. So that now that the street theatre, of course, there are movements to break it, but it got stuck somewhere into a very successful format. The mainstream theatre got stuck into a number of formulas, which was very successful and which is very relevant when it was first performed, but got stuck there. It's also the fate of the street theatre movement here. But now I want to go back to that one aspect which I mentioned about Nadagadiga, the use of the traditional forms and the rituals. It didn't start with Nadagadiga. It started in the early 70s again, and in the second theatre workshop in 1968, it is Sreekantan Nair, a very important playwright of Kerala, who wrote this one of a trilogy based on Ramayana. The plays are Zaketham, Lanka Lakshmi, and Kanjana Sita. The order is Saketham, Kanjana Sita, and Lanka Lakshmi is his last play. So these three plays were important texts written in the history of Malayalam drama. Of course, he has other dreams about the performance also. He was not a director, and in his during his lifetime, I don't think that he could see his text being performed the way he wanted it to be. He liked it to be, and he is the first person in a seminar, in a talk in 1968, coined this word Thanathu Nadakavedi, which I can translate Indigenous theatre or the theatre of the roots. Of course, this is not a new concept in the context of Indian theatre. Kamala Devi Chadopathyaya and all those people started speaking about cultural colonialism or the colonialism of the Western theatre or the British theatre into the performance system of India, and India has to break away from this colonial hangovers and to theatrically independent, and they started writing about it. And I know about 1956 drama seminar, the first drama seminar that happened in New Delhi, where people started speaking of the necessity of creating a unique, distinct performance approach which can be Indian. So an Indian theatre form has to evolve. We have to break away from the Victorian proscenium based British system of doing theatre to have complete independence. So we have got political independence in 1947, but still we are under we didn't have that cultural independence. So the theatre of independence was addressed, means this question of theatre of independence was addressed in the 1956 drama seminar. Mulkaraj, Anand, and many people who assembled there spoke about that. And there were attempts. Of course, I could see the work of Habib Tanvir started in the 50s itself, like Agra Bazaar, and later he came with Chandradasan tour. I mentioned this Chandradasan tour came into Kerala in 1977, etc. But in 1967, CN said, no, when Kerala is one state, which has a lot of great tradition of different kinds of rituals, folk traditions, folk performances, folk songs, and folk dances. We have at least minimum 400 to 500 different forms in a small state, which is done by different villages, different ethnic communities, and totally different. And all these forms are highly theatrical. And we have these two great classical forms of Kathakali and Kudiyattam, which has created its own language of narrating a story, in characterization, in costuming, in the language, the mudra system, the way it's being intonated, the music, the relation between the actor and the character, the relationship between the story and the character, the relationship between the actor and the audience, and the whole aesthetics of it. These two strong forms are there. And Kudiyattam is Sanskrit theatre itself. So why don't we look into these rich tradition to create our own new contemporary theatre, than going to Shakespeare, who is a great playwright, of course, or the colonial masters and their proscenium model, which is already stagnant and outdated in Britain, which is already stagnant and outside in Europe. So still we are going behind it. And this question which he asked in 1967 is still important, because at least more than 60 or 70% of the theatre methodology, theatre aesthetics, the theatre practice in the country is still ruled by that. Of course, there are problems and limitations, and the issues of the structures of doing theatre, the theatre buildings, the funding, the patronage. All these questions are related to these aspects, but it's a very important question. And he said, no, we have to look into our own systems. We have a different sense to color. We have a different sense to music. We have a different language to speak. We have different ethnic characters, natures, Kerala. So address these questions to evolve this Thanathu, our own theatre. Thanathu means our own signature theatre. And he theoretically proposes question, and it is Kavalam Narayana Panikkar, the great master of Indian theatre, who started moving in that direction. In the 1970 itself, he has written a play known as Sakshi, that has been produced, and it was directed by Kumara Verma, who came from National School of Drama, he was a graduate from National School of Drama Delhi, and he directed it. It was using an open space, not a proscenium stage. The actors were singing, the actors are playing music. It is a poetical play, because there was no prose dialogue, it's all poems. And people have a problem that, no, how does this becomes drama? It doesn't have a dialogue, it has all poems being sung by one person, replied by another person, and it's all poems. And that started a new insight and a new debate, and into these things which Panikkar continued in his next production, known as Devatar, and where again one of the actors, one of the celebrated actors of Kerala theatre, and also now a very, very important person in the film field. He was playing a music instrument known as Uduku, singing, dancing. So music, dance and performance, music, dance, performance and poetry linked together, and a new narrativity, a new relationship between the performance space and the audience space, which diffuses into one another. The relationship between the actor and the audience differing. And he started that kind of theatre, which resulted in the milestone production, which continued and ended up in that milestone production of Avanavan Kadamba. I don't know how to translate it. It is impossible to translate it. Kadamba is a fence. Avanavan is self. The fence of the self, or the self as the fence, or whatever it is. So that was a great production in terms of the production values, in terms of the narrativity, in terms of the aesthetics, in terms of how it connects with the present day, of the then present day also in the content also. It creates a new language. People are just astonished. What's happening? And all these productions, Avanavan Kadamba has been performed widely in Kerala and also outside. And there's a group of extremely talented, crafted actors who can sing, dance, move. There's a group of actors, a chorus of dancers, encountering a chorus of singers. The singers will have music instruments in them. They'll perform the music instruments and sing, and movement also. They will also move, while the dancers has to put dance and respond to. So these two important groups in conversation has to use the language of dance to communicate or to talk to the language of music. And this synthesis of dance and music and the dialogue of these two connected together with other characters who speaks, intonates in different kind of formats, in different kinds of systems of narrativity, which includes verbal narration, gesture language, not systematized as Kathakali or Kudiyatam, but stylized gestures, and the storyline, and the body language, and the relationship between the actor and the audience, as I said, and very informal. And it re-invoked many folk ritual festivals or events of the state, like Padayani. It used natural torches. The actors sometimes the ceremony of the entry of a common character into the performance, coming from a far distant place with procession, and the audience was free to move. There was no fixed chairs. So it was a kind of a participatory theatre, and it happened in the first production happened in 1977 or 75, somewhere there, and then it has become a milestone production. So it renewed a language, and this play has been directed by G. Aravindan, who is a National Award winning film director, not a 100% full-time theatre person. He has directed two plays. One is a play known as Kali. It's written by Sreekantan Nair, and it's an expressionistic play, which is not a very good success. Then this play, Avanavan Kadamba, he was involved with the theatre movement of Kavalam Narayana Panikkar, which was named Sobanam in the beginning, which was renamed as Thiruvaranga in the 80s. So he was doing the costumes and the art design of the Panikkar's production in the earlier period, but he is the person who directed this play. Aravindan himself has told me that it was more than his work, it's an ensemble work. It is a synthesis of the creative inputs of many, including Kavalam himself, who is a playwright, Aravindan, who is the director, and this extremely talented actors, different group of actors who are trained in different aspects, different faculties of art, like music, dance, singing, acting, all those things, all their creative contributions, and even the contribution of ITFoK Panikkar and many people who came to watch the rehearsals and part of it. So it happened as a unique event in the history of Indian theatre, not just the history of Malayalam theatre. So this opened another possibility of creating a new language of theatre based on the tradition, rejecting the aesthetics of the Western models. And later in 1977 or 77, Kavalam started directing himself. Madhyama Vyayogam, a play by Bhasa, has been his first directorial attempt. It has been performed here, and then it has been performed in Ujjain. How the text of Bhasa has to be approached. So by this time, this group Thiruvaranga or Sopanam, in the 77 it's Sopanam, then it becomes Thiruvaranga in the 80s. So they have started a unique system of acting training. Panikkar used Kalaripayattu, the martial art form, to train his actors. He trained different footworks, from different forms like Padani, Kathakali, etc. And he taught music, singing, vocalization, the sense of music, and the chanting of Kudiyatam, of Vedic chanting, all those things to enlarge the spectra of the vocal or the sonority of the actor. And he synthesized all these things into an acting language which is unique to his theatre, which has stylized posters, stylized movements, stylized gestures, stylized way of singing, and it's synthesis of that. And even in music and the pattern of rhythm, he went in not to the, he of course he is a master of Carnatic music, the raga system and the thala system of Carnatic music, and also of course Hindustani. But he said that there is a unique music system which is known as the Sopana system of music, which is Kerala, which is typical of Kerala. We have some new thala system, our own patterns of rhythm which is different from the Carnatic counterparts, like Lakshmi Thalam, Kumbha Thalam, etc., which is used in the folk form of Padani and also used by Kunjan Nambiar in his Otan Tullal. So he said, no, these systems of rhythm, these vocal patterns, and this thala system is more means friendly to the movement of the actor. It's not as rigid as the Carnatic system of rhythm. And he started using many of these rhythms in writing his lines, in formulating the movement of the actors, the footwork of the actors. So he's reinventing an almost lost system of Kerala music and bringing it upwards and applying it in theatre is one thing. And of course, I have to say about his productions which has been written in Malayalam. We have been very familiar about his Sanskrit productions because he has directed all the plays by Bhasa and Kalidasa in Sanskrit, not in Malayalam. His productions of Bhasa and Kalidasa, the Sanskrit plays are done in Sanskrit. Of course, the language of theatre is not completely Sanskrit. It's not completely Natya Shastra based. He's a master of Natya Shastra. So he has taken from the essence of Natya Shastra. He has taken from the essence of the folk regional forms. He has taken from the essence of the folk life and synthesized and created a new pattern of performance in his works. And that is much performed all over India and outside India also, all his Sanskrit plays. And he has also written a number of original plays in Malayalam, done in Malayalam. Some of them are shown outside, but it's Avanavan Kadamba written by him. And then he started doing his own productions. He started directing by himself. Theyya Theyyam, Karinkutti, all these productions, Kalluriti, Ottayan. So there are many productions written by him. And in the writing of this plays also, the language use is also much important. He didn't use the Sanskritized Malayalam. He didn't use that literary Malayalam. C.N. Sreekantan Nair was influenced by the high sounding literary Malayalam, which appear like a Shakespeare dialogue in his plays, the trilogy like Lanka Lakshmi, which is high sounding, and so actor can perform with that rendering just like a Shakespeare play. It's a highbrow, elite kind of a language. But this man started doing it in very ground to earth system. He started using words which are not that much used, very words that has been used by the villagers, by the farm workers, by the ordinary people, and going to new poetic language in describing, new similes in describing human feelings and situations and context, which is highly related to the life of people, the activity of the social activity of the people and the nature around. And so in the language of we hear, the language in which he writes, the visual which we see, the aesthetic relationship which it gives to us became a new kind of thing, which becomes very popular, which became very popular throughout the context of Indian theatre. We know that. So this all happened in the 1970s and 80s. I will say that no, these productions has influenced the modernism in the theatre of Kerala, which people didn't just accept it. There was questions, there was debates, there was quarrels. All these things are there. So was this theatre communicating to the audience? And there's a little abstraction also coming in. In the narrativity of things, it becomes a little poetic. It becomes sometimes abstract. It didn't connect with the social realism in the fashion of the social realism seen in the former period. It was sometimes speaking in the language of metaphors, and it may not address the social reality as a reality, as a very real situation. He translates it into another kind of expression. So is this creating a problem in communication to the ordinary theatre person, to the populace? So all these questions are there. And the School of Drama, it has been teaching everything. It has been influenced by the pedagogy of National School of Drama, the different kinds of training, physical training, the emotional creative, the training for the emotional creative faculty of the actor and the director, the craft of using other things into theatre, like using lights, costumes, music, the space, the different use of levels, the space construction, the designing of the space, all those things are there. And other concepts like theatre of poverty of Krotowski, Antoine Artaud, theatre of the cruel theatre, and the Stanislavski system of dealing with an actor, Bertolt Brecht, the epic theatre, and the theatre of the absurd. All these things in writing, performing, designing, enacting, organizing, etc. has been taught in the School of Drama. So there's a lot of wind that is coming from the West, and there's a lot of things that is going into our own tradition. So these two aspects was very strong. It was very, very strong in Kerala. Even if we started little late, we went ahead in a very fast rhythm. And this has been catalyzed by many other facts. And this intense traveling of this theatre workshop throughout the state has created a kind of a need for something new, and which charged even villages, I would say. And in my childhood, in the 1970s and 80s, rural theatre competitions was very important. In every village there were competitions for one act plays. So there are many groups, 2 or 3 groups in every village started forming, and they started performing new plays. They started performing plays written by themselves, written by Sankara Pillai. He wrote a number of plays there in all possible genres of it, doing it. Productions, text from Brecht. I've seen villagers watching. You can see illiterate villagers in theatre watching, waiting for Godot and applauding. I don't know whether they understood the nuance of the text, but they were accepted because they saw a new kind of performance. This newness of this one-act plays. It's a very rustic productions. It didn't use the whole facility of lighting, sets. It been created rurally in villages by young people. But there are, of course, sometimes invited directors from the school of graduates from the School of Drama, and those who have gone through these workshops, etc. They started doing with that, and this was accepted. It's a very popular thing in the 80s, and it created a massive restructuring of the aesthetics of Kerala theatre. And many industrial organizations like FSET, a fertilizer company, KSRTC, our transport company of the state government, Hindustan Latex, the content producers, and many of these companies started theatre competitions. So 7 or 8 or 10 plays belonging to the new genre of plays were selected everywhere. They compete each other. They compete in renovating the structure of writing, the structure of performance, the aesthetics of performance. And this generated a number of playwrights, directors and actors, and made theatre popular, made the new theatre popular. So these theatre competitions that is happening all over Kerala in the 80s and 90s was a catalyst to further the newness in Kerala theatre. And of course the campus theatre was also very, very important. The competitions in the university level, and the productions that's happening inside campuses, schools and colleges facilitated. And we have a number of playwrights and directors with Narendra Prasad, Vaila Vasudevan Pilla, Jose Chiramel, P. Balachandran, Joy Matthew. They were writing plays and directing plays, and a lot of new actors came in the 80s who continued their work in films later and sometimes in theatre also. These were happening. And I said that we have a group, many number of people coming from the West, doing productions in the School of Drama and collaborating with us, and we are watching their productions and their approach of work. S. Ramanujam, from a graduate from National School of Drama, was appointed as the assistant director of the School of Drama. A close associate of G. Sankara Pillai was doing a lot of workshops and directing productions, including a milestone production of Karutta Deivate Thedi, In Search of the Black God, written by G. Sankara Pillai. It's another very important production that happened in the late 70s, 77, 78 or 79. It was first performed widely all over Kerala. So that play also approaches the indigenous theatre of Kerala in a totally different way from that of Panikkar. It has a different kind of storyline. It is also performed outside the proscenium theatre. The first performance was done in the courtyard of the School of Drama, and I have seen it there only. And it has been moving all over India and sometimes abroad also. And it has been adapted to the proscenium theatre also. That's a thing that people have to do when you travel. You don't find a space which you ideally want. You have to adapt it, and the theatre, Kerala theatre, is also doing that. So Ramanujam is there. So many people were supplementing with that. And I said in 2008, means after the 90s, what happened is that it's a radical change in the economic system, and the colonialism is coming in a new form, and new technology is coming in, and modernism went away for postmodernism, or the theatre. There's a shift already from the written text to the performance text. Now by 2000, as we all know, even this performance text completely or almost completely rejected the written text and started devising plays, and the design becomes much more important than the text. And there's a new school of directors who started doing post-dramatic performances, and ITFoK and their production. And some directors, some graduates of School of Drama went abroad to study, to Europe, in England, to Poland, to Germany, and they came back. And of course somebody went to Singapore and came with their input in No and Japanese theatre or Chinese opera. They come back with new tools and new instruments and new pedagogic output, and started creating their own productions. And Aphilash Pilla, who is now a faculty in National School of Drama, Deepan Sivaraman, Jyotish MG, Shankar Venkatesan. So these youngsters, I'll call them youngsters because they are younger to me, that's all. They have matured themselves as grown up theatre people right now. They started approaching theatre in their own unique way. So the text becomes lesser important. and designing becomes much more important. So Deepan Sivaraman and Abhilash Pillai are the directors who took theatre out of proscenium. Even if they are doing a play inside a proscenium in the initial period, Abhilash did his first productions in proscenium itself. Deepan also did his first productions in proscenium, but when he went out and started to create a performance space, it almost was a spectacle which demanded a lot of things. Big space of performance, he used heights, the vertical space, moving up, things coming down, and new design where people are sitting around and the performance in between and the performance going to them and coming back. A larger space of performance. They started using other media more effectively, like visual projections, sound and music in a more enhanced and elaborate way. Multiple narrations. They will be enacting by the actors, at the same time we'll be seeing the same scene sometimes enacted, projected there, and then the same story narrated in the music, in the language of the music. So these things started happening, and the audience was sitting in totally different kinds of spaces. I could give an example of The Legend of Kazakh, directed by Deepan Sivaraman. It's based on the famous path-breaking novel of O.V. Vijayan with the same name. But it used a different kinds of approach to narrate this theatre. It addressed the taste of the audience by sharing food. We have smell. We have actors coming very close to the audience. The audience slowly become participants. So the spectator becomes actor, and he is successfully doing this large production, economically viable also. People rushed and saw the production. So houseful performances everywhere, and the money came back. Of course, it was investing more, and it has a larger kind of visual framework. I just named this one play because the time is almost reaching 1 hour. I have to mention the work of Abhilash Pillai and Jyotish, who have their own different system of doing it. Abhilash tries to include the scenographer, the music director, the circus artist, the puppets, all those things into his narrative structure of using along with the actors' creativity. So it's a collaboration of different actors to create one production. It's a total performance in his work. Jyotish has tried multiple projections, computer graphics, creation of images, trying to create a poetry through the visuals and narrate it. Of course, sometimes his work becomes an abstract, but Deepan, even if he's moving away from the text to a post-dramatic kind of text, he's having a influence of a very strong text inside it. Even in Cabinet of Dr. Caligari or the Spinal Cord is based on a novel by Marcus. So these productions, and Talatam by Abhilash Pillai, based on Tempest. Scenographer is again Deepan Sivaraman. Of course, it has not been performed in Kerala. It has been rehearsed in Kerala and performed in Goa only. It doesn't have much shows. The adaptations of Macbeth by Jyotish, all these people are there. So after 2000, theatre has an awareness that no, we should create this atmosphere. See, in contrary to that, when I look back, when I tried my Tempest as an inclusive production where audience was designed as the sea and the production happened inside, it was tough to find out a proper space to perform it. So it didn't move much beyond my city. Of course, we have a lot of productions here in my city, but in the 90s, this theatre organizers was not aware that we have to spend so much energy to create a space. For Avanan Kadamba, it was easier because he just needed a ground and a tree, so it can happen beneath a tree. So this thing happened, and along with this, to summarize that, those things that happened in Kerala theatre is one which I didn't elaborate. The creative reinterpretation of the text. It's not text repeated as such. We have to recreate the text. We have to redefine the text, and we have to give new meanings, which is having some relation to contemporary things. My productions of media on Karnavaram, of course, these are classic texts by Bhasa or Euripides. But it was speaking about the life of my life as I see it here. I'm telling the story of that period, but I'm addressing the issues present right now. So the possibility of reinterpreting the text that came very strongly back into Kerala theatre, that's one. And the use of another language and the approach of actor, that's also very important. Actor is not just saying the lines, or he's not just the method actor of Stanislavski, and the actor took multiple roles onto him. Sometimes he is the character, sometimes he is the performer. He will be performing his abilities to sing, dance, to jugglery, to do whatever is it. So his own personal performance is there. So the persona as the character, as the performer, as the interpreter, he can move into the character, out of the character. He can interpret it, he can demonstrate the character, and also he is narrating the atmosphere. So he is he's sometimes a narrator, demonstrator, critic, performer, and character. So this fluidity or the movement of the actor into these multiple roles, that become much important in many of the productions. I have been doing it much more. And theatre started using our own tradition, and it becomes a visual treat at times. It becomes, it went into the outside world, the open spaces. It's not just environmental theatre as Fechner or somebody said, it's trying to create a performance out of a space to supplement the visual language. So those productions were doing it. And of going back to the folk traditional forms that happened in the 80s by the project given by Sangeet and Academy. But there's a lot of criticism that people are just going to take some music, some costumes, something very fashionable outside and putting it into the play out of context. But that is an initial period. When it came to my own work and many others' work, we started trying to the functional, aesthetical, cultural moorings behind these adaptations. It's not external. For example, in my media, you cannot see any Theyyam outside. You cannot hear any Theyyam music. But the way the character has been performing, the process of the actor was the same thing as the process of a Theyyam artist who does it. So it becomes a super larger character. Audience doesn't know that this person is having that work which is similar to that of. So this growing up from a mundane, ordinary life of a human being, enlarging himself into a kind of a semi-god or a supreme persona, with addressing the latent and basic energies, the primordial energies inside a human being, to express a larger and more intense moments of communication. That is, we have started addressing those questions. And one of the most important things that happen in the our traditional performance is the trance situation of the actor. The actor gets possessed into a trance, and he started believing that I am the goddess, I am the thing, and he starts doing things like he will be cutting his body and blood coming out, superhuman activities, running a fire. So this transformation of a simple person completely into a character. This is not the Western identification as Aristotle said. This transportation, this possessed state, which can influence the audience, which is catalyzed by the atmosphere, the belief, the ritual, the music, and the participation of the audience. So this possibility in theatre, can we do that? So I have addressed these questions in my productions of Poranadi, a text written by Kavalam Narayana Panikkar, in media, in my production of Karnavaram, etc., where the actor grows beyond himself, beyond the limits of the human existence or the existence of an actor, as we see usually, which naturally increases the extent or the mode of communication that happens between the play and the performer. So these things, which are more internal, which is more intrinsic in the traditional forms, and of course the external peripherals as the use of half curtains to deal with the shifters in time and space, and of course the use of mask, music, ritual atmosphere, creating kalam, means the floral patterns with powders, the possession, the music, all these things supplemented this search. So Kerala theatre is enriching and going in this all these diverse moments. Of course, we are influenced. Our theatre is, the new theatre is a mix-up of all these influences. The influences coming from poetics, Aristotle, to the Shakespeare, to the colonial period, and the new theatre from the West, from all the schools, up to Sheknar or Barba or Philip Zerri, and the classical Sanskrit tradition, the tradition of Natishastra, Kudiyatam, Kathakali, and this larger extent of the many myriad folk forms, and of course the new things happening in the design, in the post-dramatic, in the postmodern place, and the whole cultural interactions that happening and collaborations happening from the other parts of the country. So our productions are influenced by all this, and we are trying to create something new. And to make it very briefly, this is what is happening in the new theatre of Kerala, and there are a lot of youngsters working in that field. Many people are going to the School of Drama, the National School of Drama, and the theatre institutes outside. They are coming with new knowledge, with new vigor of energy. And our problem is that now we don't have performance spaces which can hold these different myriad productions. And many theatre directors and many theatre groups started creating their own performance spaces. Abhinaya has started something on their own. Nirisha, a women's theatre, has their own space. I have built my own space in Lokadharmi where productions and interactions can happen. Shankar Venkatesan has started his own theatre in Attapadi, known as Sahinda Theatre, that's what he called. And Shashidharan Vallachura, a very vibrant theatre director, is inaugurating his space known as Nadaka Deep this week, just next week, the Theatre Island. And so these practicing theatre persons are not just doing theatre and not just creating new systems of plays, but they are trying to create their own spaces also which can hold their theatre. So that's very briefly about the new theatre of Kerala. Thanking you for your patient hearing.